Hey folks, it's Chris Dyer, Martial Alchemy channel, and you guys know that we discuss all things martial arts on this channel, and today we're doing something a little unique, a little special. It's the 250 year anniversary of the American fight for freedom, and I happen to be a very proud Virginia boy, and happen to live just a few miles away from Mount Vernon, and this weekend they're actually doing something really special. It's the Revolutionary War weekend, and so I'm actually right now at, if you can see right over behind me, at the grist mill, the distillery for George Washington. I'll be biking down the street just a little bit down that way in just a little bit, and we're going to be doing some interviews. I'm going to be looking around. I'm going to try and find some grenadiers. I'm going to try and get some artillery show. I'm going to get see if we can get chance to chit chat with some of the dragoons. We're going to be looking at all the things that were relevant to the early Revolutionary War, and kind of discussing with some of the historians, some of the reenactors and whatnot, how they got into it. We're just going to be exploring all kinds of different things on this special episode. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Stay tuned and let's see what we can get. What? Alright guys, Mount Vernon is right there. I'm just going to lock up the bike. I already got my tickets online, so I'm ready to head on in. In my experience, the best way to get people to answer your questions is to at least try to look like them. So I'm just going to get changed and head on in.
So, in 1777, Washington realizes he's using British maps. So what he does is he forms his Department of the Geographer. He appoints 2 captains, Skull and DeWitt, and about 8 lieutenants to go help every army move from encampment to battle, from battle to battle. We'd precede the army by about a week. They'd give us a detachment for protection, but what we would do was literally map out the route the army could take. There are no roads. So we rely on locals for information, but what we would really do is we work out of our own ranks. So out of those 2 or 3 guys, we would hire or draft out of the Army with us surveyors, landmen, how do I say it, mayors, anybody would know the area. So with that, we would set up a series of surveying crews. There'd be 3-man crews. What we really want to be careful of is not to just put out one crew, because now all the enemy has to do is watch that crew, and they would know where the Army's going. So we would put out 3 to 4 crews. Each crew was 3 men, a compass operator, and 2 chain bearers. So in order to make a map, 2 things are needed are direction and distance. The compass, these happen to be all period. The compass would give us our direction. For accuracy, we would actually come within the width of a hair, because on the other side is a hair here. In order to get an exact measurement, you would line that hair up in the top, and that would give you a true indication of where you're going. So now we have our direction. We need distance. Walk this way. And then some. A little bit. So our Gunther chain would give us our distance. As you can see, it's flexible. The beauty of it is, if it were rope, it would stretch, possibly cut on a stone. So how we would operate, we would take our compass, let's say our staff, set it up here. At the end of 5 miles, we need to find water, our first 5 miles. So my direction is over there. I calculate it. It is northeast. Now my chain bearers would start from this point, put in a stake, and then drag the chain out. If the chain ran out, they would take another pin in the ground. They would yell pin, put it in the ground. Now at the end of that distance, they might pull 4 chains and 6 links. I would write northeast, 4 chains, 6 links. Now we have to get the hay, which happens to be over that direction. So we take the whole operation to the point we finished at and begin again. At the end of the day, we'd have a series of measurements that would guide us in a path or a road to get the Army there. I would take that information at the end of the day back into the officers, who would transcribe chains and links into feet and yards, right, miles, hectares, or whatever. It's called a Gunther chain. It's a system of division, and in a sense, we can change yards and feet into rods, hectares, furlongs, a bunch of other information. So with all that information, you can take it inside, and if it's not too busy, maybe you can get an explanation. Dan? So inside is our cartographer, and then after that our duplicator.
Okay.
The cartographer would translate, and the duplicator would duplicate. Okay. Eric? Could you give him a little bit of a...
All right.
We're ongoing. We've delivered our data to you.
Here, let me hit rewind.
I've been doing this all day, huh?
2 days now.
2 days.
So, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, this is the Department of the Geographer of the Continental Army. We were an actual unit attached to Washington's headquarters staff from 1777 to 1781. And we were the people that provided the maps that were of use to the Army for lines of march, supply trains, and really more strategic thinking. So we would have simplified maps. We have some reproductions of original maps.
These are examples of the kinds of maps that were produced.
They would not be very extensive because that information was not necessarily of value to the Army. So if you think about the Yorktown campaign, Washington had to get his army, basically New York to Virginia, in the quickest possible way.
Right.
And so you need to know where to go, how to get there, where to cross the rivers, where to find forage for your horses. You know, it overlaps a great deal with intelligence, but the idea is Washington, having been a surveyor himself, knew the value of maps. The geographer was actually a fairly sophisticated role because you could hire a local surveyor to give you detailed information about a small area, but where is that area on the face of the earth? How long is it going to take me to get from that area I know a lot about to an area I don't know that much about? So the geographer would be able to position things using celestial navigation tools, draw some maps that provided the information needed to it, but be able to tell the time to know how long it would take to get from A to B.
I'm demonstrating Revolutionary War medicine, right?
Yep.
So there were, in the Revolution, it's funny how medicine worked. There were doctors who went to school. They went to university, they took tests, they got a degree. There were surgeons. They all learned by apprenticeship. And then there were apothecaries that made all the drugs. But out in the field, we kind of had to be the jack of all trades, right?
Right.
So we would learn as much as we could about all kinds of medical things. But when you were doing Revolutionary War medicine, it was kind of odd. They believed at that time that all ailments, not wounds, but ailments, were caused by the four humors of the body. And
That's right.
that was blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Too little or too much of any one of those was what was causing your ailment. We could adjust those by using herbal medicines, or the blood we could adjust by taking a cup, causing a welt on the body, and then using a fleam to lance that, and then we would draw out a prescribed amount of blood. Now, you know how Washington died.
Bled to death.
Combination respiratory infection
Right.
and bloodletting. The first set of surgeons that came in, and we know this because they kept notes.
At the Stiebler Leadbeater Apothecary Museum, they have the notes. Yeah.
They did not want to bleed him.
Yeah.
He dismissed those surgeons. He got a new crew to come in, and they bled him.
Yep.
And he didn't get better. He goes, I need to be bled, so they bled him again, and they kept doing it. So he probably became so weak he couldn't overcome the
Right.
infection. They left him alone, and he listened to the first set of surgeons, he might have survived. So that was basically how he died. Now, there's basically three major types of wounds that are going to come off the battlefield that I'm going to see most common.
Musket ball.
Musket ball, there can be stab wounds from bayonets, slashes from swords, or head wounds, because what are you going to do with your musket when you run out of bullets?
You're going to start bashing.
You're going to use it for a club,
Right.
you go whacking people on the head,
Right.
and then they're going to have a head wound. Now, if this bullet hit you in the belly, what tool do you think I might use first to find that bullet?
Oh boy. Let's see.
It's a real common tool we use to find bullets.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess one of these.
It's going to be this tool.
Poke around with a finger.
This
Yeah,
is
you're
the
gonna
first
poke
tool.
around.
I'm going to stick my finger in there, and I'm going to feel around
Ay,
for that
ay,
bullet.
ay.
If it's
There
too
we
far
go.
in for me to find it, I'm going to use a probe.
There you
Then
go.
I'm going to take this and stick in, and I hear, oh, I found the bullet.
Found it.
And I'm going to get these
There we
retractors.
go.
I'm going to open this up. You see how these are concave? They're designed like that so they'll grab that bullet, because when that bullet's inside of you, it gets blood and guts on it. It's slicker and snot. So it'll grip it, and I pull that bullet out, and I just throw it in the bowl. But let's say this bullet hits your leg, and it hits that bone. What is going to happen to that bone?
It's gonna fracture.
It's going
Break.
to shatter. A clean fracture, I can use splints to tape your leg together, and bone is living tissue. It will eventually heal and grow back together. Shattered bone is not growing back together. It's going to get an infection, and there's greater than 90% chance you're going to die. So now I'm to the point I've got to take that leg off. So what we're going to do is take you out back, lay you out on a table, right? I'm going to get those scissors there. I'm going to cut your pants legs off and expose that leg so I can kind of figure out where that wound is and look at it to see if it's something that can be healed or not. When I determine it's not going to heal on its own, and I'm going to have to amputate that leg, so the first thing I'm going to do is give you this to bite on.
Right on.
This is my anesthesia. I have no other anesthesia. Then I'm going to pick up a pettit tourniquet. This will go over the leg, tighten down, and it will shut off all the blood supply. And then I'm going to pick up a capital knife, and I'm going to find that bullet wound. I'm going to start cutting up high behind it, right down to the bone with this razor sharp knife in a circle, and I'm going to create a flap of skin like this. But this knife is so sharp, it just goes right to the bone.
Right.
Now, I've cut it down to the bone, and I've got that circular cut there, that skin-sparing cut. But now I've got to use another tool, a Caitlin knife. I'm going to insert this under that cut and clear all that muscle, tissue, tendons off that bone so that we can then reach in there, grab a retractor, put it over the bone, and pull all that skin and tissue back. Once I get past that shattered part, I'm going to pick up my bone saw. I'm going to saw that leg off, and I'm going to throw it out back because I don't need it anymore. Now, once I've done that, I've created another problem. What do you think that is?
Infection, everything else that comes along with that. Blood
Start
loss.
releasing the tourniquet. What's going to happen?
It's going to start bleeding out.
So to prevent that, I'm going to pick up this little tool, and I'm going to start pulling out all the arteries and veins, the larger ones that I can see with my eyeballs, because I don't have any microscopes, and I'm going to tie those arteries and veins off with this thread, with this
Wax
silk thread. Now, I've tied off all the larger arteries and veins real quick, and I start releasing the tourniquet, but you still bleed. Why? Capillaries. So here I'm reaching my fire pit. I'm going to pick up a cottering iron, and I'm going to start burning all the little bleeders. Once I've got them all stopped where I can release the tourniquet, I'm going to take a Linton mixture. This is raw cotton. We're going to mix the raw cotton with water and flour and make a really thick Linton mixture. Stick it in that wound. Remember that flap of skin I cut?
Fold it over and stitch it up.
I'm going to wrap that over, and I'm going to sew it closed. But what am I going to use to sew it closed with?
Horsehair.
Horsehair. But I should have told you first, why did I use cotton and flour to put in that wound?
It's going to soak up some of that blood, and it's also antimicrobial. No?
This is a natural material.
Yep.
The body will absorb the cotton and absorb the flour. I don't have to take it back out. So I take this horsehair, and it's interesting that horsehair in colonial times was real stiff, and it had little barbs on it, like a barbed wire fence. That has been bred out of modern horses. So the good news is, as I sewed with that horsehair, it would grab the skin. But to make it where I could sew with it, I boiled it first. And that was a good idea because I cut this right off the horse's tail, and it had reinforcement in it. But what I didn't realize is I sterilized the horsehair. So I'm going to take one of these larger needles. I'm going to sew that closed. Then I've got to wrap it. So I wrap the wound, and I tie it off. Do you think that tie is going to stay on for several weeks?
No.
No, it'll come loose. So the best thing that I can do is take this material that's called dragon's blood, and what that is, it's the gum of a gum Draco arbor tree from South America. I crush this up in my little tool over there, mix it with alcohol, and makes a liquid that is absolutely super glue of the period. So if I soak that bandage in this and wrap it around, it's not coming off.
Cast.
Again, I have no anesthesia, so you're in a lot of pain, and hopefully you're going to survive. Your survival chances are somewhere around 20-25%.
Born in Cambridge, England, then you're in. You're on the right team then. Came to the right place. We're going to kick some booty here today. We're the good guys.
Which team are you going to fight for, Britain or America?
Yeah,
Remember, if the rebel scum would pay their taxes and obey the law, this would all be over.
But a diplomat. Steel part, you make a flint, and then you turn around and then test it and hit the flint on the steel. So if you ever see somebody with flint and steel and they keep banging it with a piece of, no, I can't get this working. Like hitting the steel with the, well, what's that going to do? They're both impacting, no, they're not. The steel is hitting this way, and the flint is going to scratch, right? And the scratching part of it, because the metal, the metal has, it's going to break off the flint. The flint will go down there, and it's like a match. And you light the match, you feel the resistance.
Yeah. That's really cool.
I see it.
Yeah.
See a little bit of a
Yeah.
spark? Wasn't very much. I might change my flint. But that's probably enough to ignite the powder that's in the pan.
Now, the word probably is good if you're in line with about 50 other guys pulling the trigger. If you're by yourself, probably might mean that if you pull it back 2 or 3 times and it still doesn't go off, someone with a club or something with reserve musket is coming at you. So they took very much care of these things, and they were experts at their own weapons. Right. So in other words, if somebody's musket broke, and then somebody died on the field, or you picked up like a British musket, because you were allowed to pick up weapons. You couldn't get personal stuff. That was a war crime, but you could gather weapons. Now, they might not like it because if you have a British musket and everybody else has a Charleville, that means a British guy died, and they might not be happy about that.
Charleville is a French musket.
That's a French musket.
We have some gentlemen here with some Charlevilles. They're very attractive. They have a little bit
After
more.
firing these muskets produces a lot of this nasty black powder fouling. So we use this fiber called tow, which is a byproduct from making linen. So it's just flax fibers. And then you put them on your worm here at the end of your ramrod and just sort of twist it down onto these tines. And we've already run water down through to clean out a lot of the black powder fouling. But you can then shove that down the barrel. You can see that came out with more gunk. And that's not too bad. This gun is almost as clean as it's going to be, especially since we're going to be shooting again later today. But every day that the soldiers fire, they have to thoroughly clean these muskets. If you leave any of this black powder fouling inside the barrel or on the lock, it will start to eat away at the metal pretty quickly because black powder produces a lot of corrosive salts and acids when it's fired. The soldiers didn't really know the chemistry of it, but they did know that their sergeants would yell at them and probably beat them if they didn't clean their guns and let them get rusty. So we don't do that part, but we do make sure that they're thoroughly cleaned after every battle.
All right, what are we working with here? We got what type of musket you working with?
So mine is a Longland pattern. We call them today the Brown Bess
Brown
muskets.
Bess,
They call them the Longland or the King's pattern musket.
Okay.
And now I am a Hessian soldier of the Regiment von Bose, but after the regiment traveled from New York down to South Carolina to participate in the siege of Boston, their gunsmith got ill and died, so they couldn't maintain their arms anymore.
Okay.
And after the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, they were issued British muskets. So by the time they came up to fight in the siege of Yorktown, the Regiment von Bose was carrying British muskets. So that's what I have here, but we do also have the German-style muskets as well. They're a little different, but largely the same.
Okay. And you got a bayonet, 17 inches or so of steel on there.
Absolutely. Bayonet fitting right there on the front sight, which doubles as your bayonet plug. And that turns this into a pretty formidable weapon. The Germans in particular, they emphasized a lot of firepower under the Prussian doctrine. So loading quickly was a major tactical choice that they did. They were all about loading very quickly and putting rounds down range as much as possible at close range for maximum impact.
Do you know how much they drilled? How often?
So on campaign, not that much, but when they were garrisoned and not really doing a whole lot, then they would start drilling. From some of the journals that I've read, 3 to 4 times a week.
Okay.
But you know, it depends. New regiments being brought up and having to learn the drill, they probably drill it a lot more often than that.
What about the sword? Would a soldier have practice sword, or how much training do you guys have? And
absolutely none.
None.
These were largely
a pointer.
ceremonial.
Go this direction.
It's really, so as a private soldier, I'm
Yeah.
not telling anybody to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And really, what these mostly got used for in the American Revolution were duels. There wasn't a whole lot of, or any that I know of, for the musketeers fighting with their swords. There may be a few isolated cases. But
It's more of a throwback.
It's really part of the uniform.
Right.
You know, as a professional soldier, this is the kit of a professional soldier, and the ability to wear a sword. Because I don't always have a musket.
Right.
The muskets are regimental property. They are going to be, kept in storage or a bell of arms tent. I'm not going to carry a cartridge box at all times. I'm not going to have cartridges at all times. But I will be allowed to, and almost always, carry my sword. So it's sort of a status symbol. It's sort of in a non-combat situation, it kind of means, hey, I am an official soldier. Don't mess with me.
Right.
But that's pretty much it for the weapons of the soldier. You know, I have my cartridge box here with its leather insert, which is a unique feature of the German cartridge boxes. Most of the other nations use either a wood or even like tin inserts, but we have these leather inserts with the loops, and that's how the Prussians did it, and so that's how we do it, because we like to copy the Prussians. But then we've got the plate here that shows Friedrich Landgraf zu Hesse. So that's the symbol of our sovereign, the Landgrave Friedrich of Hesse-Kassel.
You had to be at least 5'10", and many of them were over 6 feet tall. With their bearskin caps, they are quite formidable. They had the same reputation then that U.S. Marines have today. These are ferocious soldiers, very proud. Those grenadiers are after a trophy, ladies and gentlemen. You capture an enemy gun, boy, that is a pretty big trophy. You capture an enemy flag, that's another huge trophy. The ripe old age of 19, Congress made him a major general. This was in July of 1777 up in Philadelphia. Lafayette's father had been a French officer and was killed at the Battle of Minden when a cannonball took his head off. So Lafayette did not have a father growing up. Now you'll see on the American side there's a whole variety of uniforms. The guys in the white and tan shirts, those are called hunting shirts. That's what common farmers wore as regular clothing. That's what frontiersmen wore. And when the war broke out, the first regiment raised for the United States Army was a rifle battalion from Pennsylvania, Thompson's Rifle Battalion. All of them equipped with Pennsylvania long rifles and hunting shirts. In the first year of the war, Washington wanted the entire Continental Army dressed in the hunting shirts because they were homespun, they were cheap to make, and they were quite useful. The problem was they got dirty pretty quickly, they wore out, and they didn't look real good compared to the smarter uniforms. And it becomes pretty clear after about a year or so, the more colorful formal uniforms are preferred because it makes soldiers feel like soldiers. A great myth of the American Revolution is that the British lost the war because they wore red and stood out in the open. The British actually won 90% of the battles in the war, and They wore red in battle until 1889. The color did not matter in the 18th century because the smoothbore muskets are not very accurate. When you fire the smoothbore musket, the ball, which is smaller in caliber than the barrel, tends to rattle around in the barrel a little bit. So when it comes out, you're not exactly sure where it's going to go. It's going to go opposite from where you are, but typically after about 30 or 40 yards, it's going to veer off one way or the other. So the European soldiers were taught to stand in ranks and fire volleys, and that's what you see going on here. They're in 2 or 3 ranks in Europe. In the American War, they typically were in 2 ranks. You break the line up into companies, and that's what you see on the British side especially, and you fire by company, and then sometimes fire by platoon, or fire by section, to keep a constant fire coming out of your line. Most of the shots miss, even at 50 yards, which is the common distance in many battles. Think of that as a football field. You're in the end zone, they're on the 50-yard line. You are that close. Well-trained regular soldiers can load and fire their musket 3 times a minute. So that's loading and firing in 20 seconds. If you get within 50 yards of your opponent and your men are well motivated and you've got brave officers, they can rush your opponents with bayonet charge and break them. And that's how many of the battles of the Revolution were won by the British, because American troops up until 1777-78 typically would panic seeing a line of British redcoats or Hessian soldiers coming at them. In the first big battle after the Battle of Bunker Hill, first big battle was the Battle of Long Island. That was in August of 1776. It was the first time Hessian soldiers were in battle. You look in the middle of the British line there on the left. The Hessians are in the middle, dressed in blue, and they have a yellow flag with a Lion of Hesse castle on it. They followed the Prussian system, and their drill was quite long and elaborate, but they were extremely disciplined soldiers. And in the first battle there that they were in at Long Island, they attacked the Pennsylvania Rifle Battalion and slaughtered it. The riflemen didn't have bayonets. The riflemen were brave, but the Hessians were furious, and they took them out. To the left of the Hessians are another extremely formidable group, Scottish Highlanders. The regiment that you see down there is the Royal Highland Regiment, also known as the 42nd. They came over in 1776, and again, when they went into battle, you could hear Highland war yells and bagpipes. On the Continental side, you see the Continental regulars that are in blue coats with red facings. Lots of regiments in the Continental service as early as 1776 tried to dress like that. The Delaware Regiment was entirely dressed that way. Some of the Pennsylvania units were, some of the Virginia units were also. But the uniforms wore out quickly. Civilian clothing was prevalent in the Continental forces, and until France officially came into the war, we were sporadically getting supplies from France. Muskets, gunpowder, cannons, and occasionally clothing. Once the French alliance was secured in February 1778, France immediately sent 20,000 uniform coats over for Washington's army. At that time, Washington's army was at Valley Forge. When they marched into Valley Forge, they were in dire condition. Quarter of the men without shoes, the rest of the men, their clothing in absolute tatters. 6 months later, when they marched out of Valley Forge, most of them were dressed the way you see these guys down on the field now. Blue coats, red facings, or brown coats with red facings, and disciplined the way you see those Continental troops.
Well, all right, guys, we did it. We made it back. Bike's still here, so that's good. I hope you guys had a good time. I enjoyed it. The blast from those cannons is wild. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys had fun. This was really interesting.